I wonder if you're editing all day and you're working with authors, and I know you give a talk on things that writers don't know about editors, and one of them is that they're not reading submissions there in the office. So I'm assuming you're taking a lot of that work home and doing that reading as well. So when are you finding time to write? What's your writing to editing ratio look like at that point?
Yeah. And I will say also, if people watching want to do further reading, I wrote an article about that for Publishers Weekly, which was what authors know that they want editors to know, what editors know that they want authors to know. So I have like a whole list of them. Yeah, and most of the reading of submissions does not happen in the office. And maybe, the earlier you are in your career, the less work you're taking home. So, I sold my first book while I was still an assistant editor. It probably would have been hard to do later on in my career when I was acquiring more, as opposed to, assisting my bosses, who were the ones who were doing the acquisitions. Yeah, I think I had not acquired for myself a single book at the point that I sold the first book that I had written, which I think just makes you simply have more time. But yeah, I was always, because certainly by the time I left Penguin, I was still writing, and at that point I was acquiring and editing a lot of books of my own and had a lot of submissions. And I don't know, for me it was just about like drawing clear boundaries of sort of like I would read submissions on the subway to and from work. I would read submissions before going to bed at night, stuff like that. But like when I had hours that were set aside for writing, I wouldn't sacrifice those. And if it meant getting back to an agent later than I wanted to, like, that's unfortunate and I felt guilty about it. But also like I had to do what I had to do. And this is why often editors are not reading full manuscripts, and why we talk about how important it is to have, first few chapters that like really grab you, because editors just have so many submissions and so little time to read that they're starting to read sort of, like, if there's any opportunity to be like, okay, like I don't need to keep reading this, then they're going to take that opportunity and start reading the next submission.
Okay, what are common outs that you would be looking for? And how long a subway ride are we talking?
Half an hour, but I'm a very fast reader.
How fast are you? I don't know if you clocked it or if you have a
really fast. I have not clocked it. I'm very fast.
When you're not editing, how many books would you say you read in a week, a month?
Oh, it depends what. I can't answer that. It depends what the book is, how interesting it is. If it's a book that I want to read and I'm engaged in the story, and I want to find out what happens, I'll read it in a day or two. But if it's, a nonfiction book, maybe where I feel like it's important but not super narratively compelling, could be months. I'm usually reading a bunch of different stuff at once on a bunch of different formats. So I'll be, reading a manuscript for work, reading a manuscript because I might blurb it, reading, a book for like just my book club for fun, reading a friend's book, reading something I got in from the library because it sounded good, sort of like a bunch of stuff. And which again is why I like, it has to be good, because otherwise it just kind of gets buried with everything else that I'm reading.
Have you always been a fast reader, or is this a skill that you've developed?
I have always been a fast reader. I remember in middle school, kids
I'm looking for someone that could show me how to read faster than I do.
Practice. I think you just have to do it a ton.
Fair enough.
Yeah, when I was in middle school, I remember kids like making fun of me for how fast I read. And now I want to go back and be like, yeah, I actually got a career out of that. It would be hard to have my career if you couldn't read as fast as I do.
Well, I'm usually good for about 2, sometimes 3 books in a week if I'm really focused. But I know that's nothing compared to some speed readers who can do 10, 20 books in that same period of time.
I am not reading more than 2 or 3 books a week, because a lot of it is just, how much time I'm devoting to it, how much interest I have in it. It's not, like if I wanted to spend all day reading, I could get through 10, 20 books a week. But that's not what I want to do. And when you're an editor, often you're not finishing a book. You're reading pieces. You're reading the first 50, maybe first 100 pages of a dozen books a week. And then you're also rereading the same manuscripts that you're going to be publishing over and over and over again. So it's a very different sort of reading experience.
So when you were trying to clear those submissions out of your pile, like get out of here so I could focus on the ones that we're definitely going to publish, what are the most common outs that you were putting? What gave you permission to stop reading?
Yeah, so let me think. Sometimes it would be just that of like, I don't feel compelled to keep reading. Like, I'll just say like, this book feels too easy to put down. And like, if it's too easy for me to put down, I believe that it would be too easy for like a distractible 9-year-old to put down as well. So going along with that, it would be like, maybe the stakes feel too low, or maybe I don't care about what happens to this character, or, maybe I don't buy the conflict. The conflict seems like it could be solved, but for the hand of the author, just keeping this conflict going in order to like have a book. Or I don't really care if the character resolves this conflict. I'm not that bothered by the existence of this conflict in their lives. Or, it could be writing style, just saying like, the voice doesn't sound authentically childlike or teenage to me. Or even I find the voice off-putting, and then it's like, I don't want to spend time with this manuscript. And then sometimes I always would read until I had a point where I could say definitively, like, here's why it won't work for me. And I think I could have gone through submissions a lot faster if I could just say, like, I know I'm not going to publish it and therefore I can pass on it, but I always felt obligated to explain why I wasn't going to publish it. So there were many manuscripts that I did read all the way to the end. And then my explanation for why I wasn't going to publish it would just be sort of like, I don't, like, it's fine. And if it was already a book, it would be a book. That would be fine. I'm sure people would read it. Some people might enjoy it. But like, I'm not in love with it. And maybe there's no reason why, or no reason that I can put my finger on, but I can't invest like the time and money in it if I'm not in love with it and not ready to like passionately advocate for it every day for the next 2 years.
I love this idea that you're going to pass on a book, but you want to read it to the end just so you have a good reason for why you're passing on it. And is that to preserve your relationships with whatever editor or agent had submitted that manuscript to you? Or just out of personal obligation because you yourself are an author and you want authors to be treated fairly, I assume?
Yeah, I think it's probably more that. I mean, definitely, most of the agents who submitted to me were people who I knew, and therefore I wanted to, like, give their manuscripts due consideration and give them some piece of useful feedback. But I think more than that was, like, the author is a person who worked really hard on this. I know how long it takes to write a book, and I've had plenty of books get rejected. Like, it's not any easier to write a book that gets rejected than it is to write a book that gets published. Like, it's hard and time consuming and, and emotionally involved either way. So just wanting to, give them something, because I've gotten the rejections that are just like, it's not right for me. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with that? How am I supposed to improve? Or, is it just dumb luck? Like, wanting to give authors what it is that I want to get.
And I know at that same time you're working on some pretty big properties. You were working on Corduroy. You're working on Ferdinand, The Snowy Day, and Angelina Ballerina. They'll be big, recognizable names. That's got to be a heavy burden when you've got Corduroy there on your shoulders. You've got children across or around the world. don't let them down. How does that change when you're approaching a property like that versus something brand new? Is there a sense of I don't know if greater responsibility is the word. Maybe just yeah. What is the difference if you're working on a big Corduroy type project versus this is a brand new project that I hope will be the next Corduroy, but presently isn't?
I actually find it easier to work on something that's already a big property because the support for it is already there from marketing and sales and everyone else, booksellers, etc., because it's already a known quantity that has proven its profitability. So, you know, if you do a new book in the Corduroy series, it's not very hard to get approval to pay for that book, and you don't have to fight to get marketing to come up with a really good marketing plan for it or anything. That's all kind of assumed because it's Corduroy. But when you're doing, you know, a debut YA novel, it's, you know, those are ones that I take on because I'm like, I love this specific story. It's not like, oh, I love the character of Angelina Ballerina, I love the character of Ferdinand. It's like, I love this story and I want to get it out into the world. And therefore, I think there's like a lot more, you feel a lot more like personal responsibility for it. And also it's a lot easier to feel like you failed that personal responsibility because it's much more likely that marketing is going to say like, well, we're not going to put a ton of money into a big campaign for this debut novel. You know, we don't know how it's going to do, so we'll kind of wait and see. And, you know, it's just like, I really want to do right by my writers. Every editor does. And, you know, especially it's like we know how much work they put into this and what their hopes for it are. And particularly if it's, you know, an auction situation where it's like they chose us, like they chose me to be the editor and they could have chosen somebody else, then it feels like, you know, if the book doesn't come out the way that I wanted it to, it feels like I'm like, you know, betraying them in some way. And you don't get that so much with something like Ferdinand because A, of all, like, it's going to come out really well because it's Ferdinand and everyone's going to be excited about it. And B, of all, the author isn't even there. At that point, you're dealing with an estate or a foundation who's managing the rights to the property. And they certainly have needs of their own, but it's not their, like, you know, creative baby.
So at any point do you get to, I mean, you're reading all day for all the reading you've got to keep up on, you're talking books, you're thinking books. I'm assuming at some point do you just go watch a movie, binge a TV show, play a video game, do something else, or is it just stay in the zone with books?
Just books. But yeah, now that, I mean, again, the past 3 years have been different because I left Penguin. So now I've watched some TV shows. I mean, I'm still not great with TV shows, but like I watch them sometimes. We're like definitely getting better, trying to catch up.
You know, TV is one of those things where, aside from the really big ones, like I'm watching Falcon and the Winter Soldier, naturally, the really big ones that I know I'm going to have conversations with people I like about, I'll watch that once through. But anything else, like I was trying to watch the Hannibal show, and it was like, oh, if this were a book, if I was reading Thomas Harris and somebody killed somebody with an eel, which what a wonderful middle grade example I've chosen, but that did happen in one of those books, I would do the work of convincing myself for Mr. Harris. I'd be like, I don't know, I'll add some details in my mind, I'll make it work. But if I'm watching it and I know it's actors, nope, I can't do it. Get me a book. Let me do the directing on this. I'll make sure it's believable.
That's very funny. Yeah. No, I like TV. I like movies. I just kind of like stories in general. Like, maybe regardless of medium, I like stories.
Are you still doing gymnastics or hobbies completely outside of storytelling?
Definitely not gymnastics. I would severely hurt myself. I like to ride my bike, though I fell off my bike yesterday, so I don't know if you can, I have like I like fell on my lip, so it's like a little swollen. But I love riding my bike, and I love traveling. Obviously, I haven't done much of that this past year because of COVID, but you know, even when I was working at Penguin, I took every single one of my vacation days and would go as many places as I could. And seeing friends, and sure, I have other hobbies. I sleep a ton, like to the point where it's probably my major hobby. Dance parties. My boyfriend and I do a weekly dance party that we've been streaming since COVID began. So we do a weekly streaming dance party, and so doing, promotion for that and stuff like that. So yeah, it's I find many things to keep myself busy.
Where can a esteemed audience tune in to watch these dance parties?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. It is at twitch.tv/Brian Blackout. And we also, or I talk about it on my Twitter, like every Monday, I remind people to come to our streaming dance party. So yeah. And then we started a newsletter about things to do in Austin. So I spent a lot of time like looking at interesting things to do and like compiling them for newsletter readers and stuff. So yeah, there's plenty of stuff that I do that is not for profit, is just because it's stuff that interests me.